What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Invincible Iron Man, and Riri Williams is about to get smacked around, and not even by a little bit. Of course, this opens up with Riri Williams showing up at the Hellfire Club. Now, for those of you guys who are just joining us in the Iron Man comics, yes, in the larger Fall of X event, Sentinels, Orchis, that huge organization, is hunting down mutants everywhere that they can find them. Tony Stark is one of the very few Avengers, if we're being honest, that's avidly working against the forces of Orchis and trying to help the mutant population, but he's also got his own thing going on, right? His own struggles and issues and so on. But he's married to Emma Frost, quote unquote, Miss Hazel, who basically wears an inhibitor ring so the Sentinels won't realize she's a mutant, and Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, is kind of like the public face of the Hellfire Club. So he's the guy that is more or less keeping those mutants operating within the Hellfire Club essentially safe from Orchis. But what ends up going on here is that when Riri Williams shows up, one of the things to remember is she has the 10 rings of the Mandarin. She's had them for quite some time. And when Miss Hazel shows up, Riri Williams does not know that Hazel is actually Emma Frost. So she tries to use the telepathic ability from the Mandarin's rings to overpower Hazel and then say, like, take me to Iron Man. But as we learned from the original Fall of X event, the core X-Men themselves had what was called the red triangle instilled in their brains. In effect, it was a safety measure created by Xavier, so that even if all the other mutants are somehow subdued or captured by telepathy, that the core X-Men would not be, right? That's why Emma Frost has these words resist that come out as a literal triangle. The issue is that her inhibitor ring falls off, and then her telepathic powers emerge, and she immediately snatches up Riri Williams' mind and brings it into the mindscape. And that's when Riri Williams realizes what's going on, that it's actually Emma Frost. Here's the funny thing about this. Riri Williams is too dumb to realize Emma Frost is not to be trifled with. She's an Omega level telepath, man. She could have this girl just walking around like a cat for the rest of her life, eating cat food. That's just the kind of power that she has. So the two of them actually end up getting into like a kind of fight. What's really cool here is Emma Frost has like these brass knuckles that say Hellfire. It's like that scene from Chappelle's Show, right? Like, what is it? Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories, when Rick James punches him in the face and he's got a ring that says Unity. That was amazing. But I'm just saying, this is crazy because it kind of breaks down into a fight between the two. But while it does look like Riri Williams is essentially holding her own, have no illusions. This is Emma Frost pulling her punches. Right, this is Emma Frost just like taking it lightly on this girl. Because what's crazy is like literally Riri Williams responds and she's like, are you kidding me? You're the White Queen wanted for murder, and now you're suddenly married to Tony Stark. And the response of Emma is, excuse me, Tony gets to be married to one of my aliases. Now, how is it that this ring of yours grants you telepathic powers? Because Emma Frost is not overly familiar with the rings of the Mandarin. And what they do is they kind of provide people an artificial ability to use these varying powers, manipulate fire and so on and so forth. And that's one of the things that Emma Frost had picked up on, that when it came to Riri Williams using telepathy, she was not a true telepath. She was simply just enhanced. Now, the reason why that matters so much and why that's so incredibly important is a true telepath is a person that has been using telepathy for really most of their life, ever since their adolescence, presumably when their powers first manifested, likely during puberty or somewhere around that time. A person who's enhanced artificially gained the power of telepathy, meaning they may have the ability to control it, but nowhere near the same level of nuance as someone who is a true telepath. Because a person who's enhanced, in this case Riri Williams, she can just take the ring off and that power of telepathy is gone. She doesn't have to spend years and years of her life honing her abilities, learning how to keep other people's voices out of her head, learning how to put her voice into other people's heads, just the total nuance of it, right? Like Riri Williams doesn't have that. And so while this kind of conflict is breaking out, you switch back to Tony Stark and Kingpin, who are just kind of talking, and then suddenly the detectors go off that say like, mutant detected. One of the things Tony Stark says, or really Wilson Fisk says, is that Orchis offered to install the mutant detector, and declining the offer would have appeared suspicious. That if Wilson Fisk, especially coming out of, what is it, Devil's Reign, that storyline where he kind of quote unquote went to war against like the superhero community, if he's really as steadfastly against mutants as he publicly says he is, then why would he turn down the assistance of Orchis to detect mutants wherever they need to be found? It's a smart move. And so again, what ends up happening is that when a giant Sentinel shows up here, Wilson Fisk bashes his face in and then tells him an assassin, the one called Mystique, just broke in and tried to take me out. It's a really good way to try to subvert the Sentinels themselves. But one of the things to know, and we covered this during like Days of Future Past and any of the stories that deal with Sentinels, they're not like human beings. You can't rationalize with them, you can't reason with them, you can't trick them or anything along those lines, unless you have the ability to either dodge their sensors or somehow interfere with the inner workings of their programming. They will come for you, and they will come for you with ruthless aggression. That's what made Days of Future Past so bad, right? It wasn't that there was some kind of all-powerful uber Sentinels that existed out there like in the movie. No. There were just so many of them, right? It was a war of attrition. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Sentinels patrolling the United States at all times, right? It was a crazy situation. And so even Emma Frost starts to realize this, because remember, given her level of telepathy, yes, she can fight Riri Williams in the Mindscape, but she can also be aware of what's going on out there in the real world. That's how capable she is. And she's like, the Sentinels are going to be upon us, and if you insist on continuing this fight, we can do one in one of Orcus's labor camps. And so Riri Williams tries to go back on the assault, only to be slapped around again by Emma Frost. And that's when she snaps back to reality, and then her and Riri Williams join Iron Man in this attack against a Sentinel. Now, here's the cool thing about this, right? This ending was something I never saw coming, not in a million years, right? Emma Frost, of course, she did end up with a fastball special, which initially started out as a Colossus and Wolverine move. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar, literally it was just Colossus throwing Wolverine. It's one of the most simple but iconic movements in Marvel Comics, and it's kind of the same thing here, right? Riri Williams throws Emma Frost at the Sentinel. Emma Frost takes on her diamond form and manages to punch this thing, but at the end of the day, the concern is not this Sentinel. The concern is that the Sentinel will tell Orcus and everybody else what's going on, because remember, the information that these Sentinels have are being sent back to Orcus at regular intervals. So if they do not stop this thing before the information is sent back, they're going to be met with a mountain of Sentinels. And so what goes on here is that when Iron Man says, I can't crack this armor in the stealth suit, Ironheart, what have you got from the rings? The response of Riri Williams is, she says, I think I have something on board that's better than the Mandarin rings. I've got that special order you asked me for, Tony. And when she uses it, it shrinks the Sentinel down. She brought Pym particles, right? Iron Man requested Pym particles, and it's such a genius thing to do, right? You don't see this very often, right? Like, it's such a just genius strategy. There's this gigantic Sentinel that's out there, use Pym particles, shrink it down, and then smash it, right? Step on it. This thing's virtually useless. It's just a machine. That's really it. Now, this seems to ignore all the issues with density and all that kind of stuff, but nonetheless, right? Like, they managed to take this thing down, because one of the things to know about Pym particles, just because the Sentinel is shrunken down does not mean that it's weaker than it's historically been before. It's just as strong, it's just really small. So by all standards of measurement, it should presumably be able to still hold its own in a fight, but whatever, comic books, who cares? So once this thing is destroyed, everything is more or less kind of sorted out. But here's the cool thing, right? Here's the really cool thing about this. Wilson Fisk plays the public face to the press and the whole 9 yards, right? He says, I'm grateful for our emergency responders and for the Stark Sentinels, of course. Without them, the mutant who attacked me might have succeeded in more than the property damage to my home, right? So he's kind of able to lead the public off the trail to the fact that, like, Emma Frost was actually here. Now, of course, Riri Williams still has some of these Pym particles, but what Stark tells Riri is, I need you to look at something that I've been working on, and I need you to build something as well, right? What he says is, he asks her, what do you think, right? And she says, the design work is impeccable. And he says, yes, I know. That's not what I'm asking. Can you build these ships? And she asks, how much Mysterium? And where on Earth will it be secretive or safe enough? And he says, nowhere on Earth is safe enough. I need you to go up there. And he says, but you have to be sure that you can get it done. And he even goes so far as to tell her the lives of everybody on this planet depend on you successfully fabricating those designs. Now, here's the kicker. It'd be very easy for us to assume that she's going to Mars, right? She's going to Arakko. She's heading up there to basically work with what are believed to be the surviving mutants that are up there. Because remember, Tony Stark doesn't know what's happening on Arakko. Storm and the whole Genesis War and all that stuff. They have no idea what's taking place. But that doesn't seem to be where she's going. He simply says, when you get there, ask for Eitri. It looks like he's sending her to Nidavellir, right? To the dwarves, the guys who craft and build incredible weapons, arms, and armament, right? Now, here's the kicker about this. We've only seen one instance before where something like this was done, and that was during Fear itself. That's when Iron Man built that armor, at least those suits of armor for various people that were imbued with portions of the Odin Force, right? So again, it's cool. Who knows how all this is going to look? But in essence, it's them going up, or at least Riri Williams going up, using the Mysterium that's being provided to her that Tony Stark isn't using for his Iron Man suit. And then in turn, building up these new ships and whatnot that can be presumably used in the war against Orcus that are based on Mysterium. And keep in mind, Mysterium is equally capable and durable to adamantium, not true adamantium, not the stuff bonded to Wolverine's skeleton, but the next step down, right? The stuff that Ultron historically used. So it's cool and it's really exciting. But in the next video, we will, at least it looks like, finally get Iron Man in his Mysterium suit, which I am hyped about. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. If you guys need to get caught up on the Iron Man comics and what's going on right now, make sure you click this link to the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.